Jen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
For our audience, Jen is co-founder and chief research officer of Pocket Scribe, a medical software startup.
Yes.
Now we'll just dive right in.
Okay.
What problem does this startup really tackle in your mind?
So have you ever been to the doctor's office?
A few times.
Did they see you on time?
I think sometime, most of the time, yeah.
Really? Okay. Well, you have some amazing doctors then. I can definitely speak from experience. Last year, I broke my arm. Don't go roller skating over age 30 unless you want to risk breaking your arm. And I was waiting in the waiting room for like 3 hours just to be seen with my bone essentially sticking out of my arm. So what's happening behind the scenes is that, doctors are obviously inundated with patients, but they also have to keep up with writing their notes, both for billing and legal requirements. So what we're trying to tackle is that we're trying to make it easier for doctors to get their notes into the system, and also help improve billing practices through like a billing and analytic tool that we've developed.
And so really the customer here is for the medical professionals.
Exactly. Yeah. So we initially were targeting doctors because our founder is a doctor, but we're quickly hoping to expand to all medical professionals, including nurse practitioners, physician assistants. It could even be used by physical therapists, psychiatrists. So we really hope to quickly expand to include all medical professionals.
What is there currently, I guess, for medical professionals to use to do this function, or if any?
I guess speaking from a physician point of view, because that's what I know most about just through our founder, Nikhil, he's an emergency medicine doctor. So what they typically do is see the patient in the room and then try to get back to their workstation to write their notes out, like type them, or they can use these like legacy tools where it's direct dictation and it's hooked up to their computer. So it's like a microphone hooked up to their computer and it only transcribes exactly what the doctor says. So it's prone to typos. It's prone to like hearing the wrong word and then you have to go back and fix it. So that's kind of the current system. And that's really why things are bogged down, because they have to go to their workstation and complete their notes. For Pocket Scribe, we have a smartphone app. So the note can be dictated from anywhere. When the doctor is running around from patient room to patient room, when they're waiting for lab results, when they've quickly ran to the bathroom or to grab a cup of coffee. And they can like dictate the note in a natural stream of consciousness, like in a way that makes the most sense to them. And then we're employing AI that will take whatever they said and sort it into the relevant notes or the relevant sections of the medical note. So it's nice in that way that they don't have to, click on each section. It will be sorted for them automatically.
So many startups now are adding or are utilizing AI as a functionality. What specifically differentiates your AI, perhaps, or your tool versus the myriad of other AI tools being incorporated into every possible startup?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think the specific like prompts and commands that we've put into place using just like GPT-4 right now gives us the output that we're looking for. So having that publicly available has been incredibly helpful. But we're not only using these commands and prompts in our company. That's mostly for the dictation piece, but we also have a billing and reimbursement tool. So just a little bit of background. There's been a massive billing change recently where doctors used to have to enter like an ICD code, and then those codes would correspond to the reimbursement they received. But now reimbursement comes from the like quality of this narrative that doctors are writing out in their notes, and it's less about just like codes. So there's a lot of confusion around like what that narrative needs to include and how, the most reimbursement that you can get from it and in what ways. So our tool is using proprietary AI. We're fine tuning either, we're working on it right now, the GPT or Facebook models with a proprietary data set, so that ultimately what the output of the billing and support tool will be like a score on your note, like this is your grade. We're trying to kind of gamify it to encourage users to go back and see what they could do better in terms of if they're meeting the new billing and coding requirements or billing and reimbursement requirements. And we've also developed like a system of nudges, so it can nudge the doctor and be like, hey, that patient that you just saw, if you add X, Y, and Z, you could up your reimbursement by this much. Yeah, and so we're hoping it's like a more active or interactive way to get doctors to learn these new requirements rather than sitting through like hours long training videos. It's kind of learn as you go with like a fun, gamified way of doing it.
Right. I know the whole billing situation is complicated, I'm sure, right? There's so many things you could report. What happens when AI starts suggesting these alternatives to the narrative? Well, I guess, like, is there risks to that?
Yeah, so the good thing with ours is that those are just going to be like pushed to the doctor as a nudge, as a suggestion. They're not going to be automatically integrated into the note.
Right.
We don't want we don't want our AI like hallucinating, which some companies have done, but there's huge risk to that in terms of like legal and billing requirements. Like we want to make sure that what's making it into our notes, the doctor said and is comfortable with. So that's a really important part to us, is we have a non-hallucinatory AI model.
I guess when you mentioned earlier that this is, proprietary, how do you come about building something like that?
Yeah, I think nowadays it's great having these huge models like GPT because you don't have to start from scratch. So I think if you can collect the data or you can get access to already collected data, you're in a good place. And that's really where your strength comes from when you are building your company, is like having access to your own data. Because then it becomes yours and it's proprietary. And so once you have that, and in our case, we have patient notes, that have been dictated out by our app, and adjudicators who are like providing the scores that I discussed. And we'll be using that information to fine tune, like I said, a GPT or Facebook model.
Run me through the timeline of how this venture got started.
Yeah, so about a year ago, right as GPT was becoming big, our founder, Dr. Nikhil Illa, built a proof of concept just with like drag and drop and GPT queries, essentially, to see like if he dictated into something, if he could get it to sort it in the way that he wanted to, in the way that's required for his note. And like after a lot of tinkering with it, he was able to like build this really, really simple just web app. And from there, we got kind of excited about the potential of building it out into like a formal like iPhone app and Android app. And so for the last year, we've been doing that, building out our app, kind of mapping out our company roadmap. So we have our app at this point that's set to launch on the Apple App Store in early April. And that only includes our dictation tool right now, not our billing and reimbursement tool. And so we're still, working on that and adding additional features. And we have piloted Pocket Scribe with a number of physicians at Penn. And we got a lot of feedback from them. So, over this last year, we've been integrating the features that like doctors actually want to see. And that's been important to us because so often tools have been developed without talking to the clinicians that are going to use them. And the hospital buys them and then they just sit and get dusty and no one ever uses it. So it was really important for us to design something that doctors really wanted to use and listen to them on what features they wanted to have. So we've really just been building for the last year.
Yeah. And when do you imagine this product will be kind of launched?
So our initial dictation app will be launched in the next few weeks. You can look up Pocket Scribe on the Apple App Store, and it should be there, and I can update. Or you can follow us on LinkedIn for the exact launch date. And then from there, we're just going to be continuously adding features. I don't have an exact date for Scribe Max, which is our reimbursement and billing tool, but that should be coming out in the next 6 months, I would say.
And are these all going to be one app, or is it like
It's all, yeah, you'll be able to add Scribe Max as like an add-on to your subscription for Pocket Scribe, the original dictation tool.
Got it. And that's the business. Well, I guess let's dive into the business model a little bit, right? It's an app. Is it going to be free, or how does the business model really ultimately work?
Yeah, so it's a subscription-based monthly or yearly. You get a little bit of a discount if you do the yearly. We'll also have a free trial period. We are targeting individual clinicians originally. Like our original goal was that you should be able to download this app and use it upon download with no crazy training videos or big like energy and effort to start up and using it. So that's currently our goal. We're also approaching like small to medium sized hospital groups for enterprise agreements. The reason we're not going after these like MGHs right now is that a lot of them are trialing some of the competition like Microsoft Nuance, and some of these bigger known companies, and they cost so much money. So these smaller to medium sized groups just can't use them. And so we really see this as like a group that they deserve a tool. We've priced it appropriately so that they can use it. And we think it from a business standpoint, this is like a market that is not as saturated as those huge hospital groups that everyone's vying for.
Right. And so for these apps, like let's say a small medical group would have to sort of enter a enterprise version. Like
Exactly.
They can't just buy one app once and then
an individual physician at that group could, and that's actually part of our business model as well, is if we get enough buy-in and traction from these individual docs and they say to their group like, hey, there's 20 of us using this, like, can you do anything about it? The ideal situation would be that we would enter a business agreement with that hospital group. So that's kind of our thought process on how to leverage and use those independent practitioners.
Yeah. For many entrepreneurs out there, when they're developing product, they're also trying to find kind of a market fit and market size. So tell us a little bit about what's the market size really of this application.
Right. I mean, you could say the market size is every medical practitioner in the United States, right? And like I said, that includes more than just doctors. But for us, we're really initially targeting independent clinicians and small to medium-sized hospital groups. I think that will, help us gain traction and notoriety. To eventually maybe go for some of the larger groups. But we're kind of happy, and it's within our mission statement to support these smaller groups. And like I said, that's why we're priced the way we are. I think, there's a lot of potential, and if the time comes that we're ready to go to bigger groups, then we will. But we're starting where we're starting.
Got it. For the product itself, as you mentioned, and the medical field itself is so, fragmented. There's so much going on. But we have seen more recently that there's been a bigger consolidation of a lot of the medical hospitals and professionals. To what degree do you feel that consolidation or that has been good for the medical industry? And as you mentioned, those are the big ones, aren't necessarily your clients at the moment, but like what proportion might represent bigger, bigger firms versus the more smaller, fragmented mom and pop, or generational family doctor situation?
I think it's hard coming from Boston, where we're just like affronted with these huge groups, but we have to remember there's 49 other states in the country, and you have these smaller states, or you have states with really, really small towns, and that is where mom and pop is, or that is where you have much smaller hospital networks. They may be still a network, but instead of being like a huge conglomerate like MGH, they may just involve, 5 to 10.
Yeah, for those that are listening,
Clinics.
MGH is, I believe, Mass
General.
General.
Yeah.
So, which is that and Harvard, it's the whole big system.
Right.
So,
and being here and being at Harvard, that's like immediately where your brain goes to like, oh, if you could get an agreement with Harvard. But there's so many other doctors and clinicians doing important work that are not part of these huge systems. Just briefly, though, to speak to some of the benefits of these groups coming together, I think, like Epic, which is an electronic medical record. It's a little separate from what we're talking about, but they are starting to become more accessible to startups. And from what I've looked into, they're almost going to have like their own version of an app store, which is really great because that means that, they're willing to start to integrate with startups and with other smaller businesses. And for us, it would be perfect if we could host on their app store. Then we would have like direct integration of our output from our app right into the medical record, which is down the line for us, something that's really, really important.
that would be very interesting. I guess, that would presume they're allowed to have their own app store, I believe, on iOS and all that, which I know that's a bigger issue. I don't know if that's allowed on Android as well, but
I don't know.
Yeah, definitely very important to consider. Going back to, I think, as you mentioned, you have a market fit, you have a product that's coming out, you're starting to experiment with that, and you're going to do that in just, probably in the month this episode comes out.
Yes.
I think what is really important for entrepreneurs who are listening to learn a little bit about the team formation, because often somebody, figure out, or somebody, as they're trying to see if they want to go into building a startup themselves, is, do I do this alone? Do I do this with a team? So tell us a little bit about how the team formed. With Nikhil, I believe, was the founder, and then he brought you and another co-founder on. So you're a team of three.
Yes. Yeah. So in between getting my master's and coming and starting my PhD here, I worked in clinical device trials for about the last 8 years. And so that kind of is how I fit into this picture. Is I know some of the regulations about getting these trials or getting these devices into hospitals, and I have a connection or a network of people who make decisions on what types of tools may be good for hospitals and all of that. So Nikhil, our founder, he's a doctor. And so he knew that he needed a tool. It wasn't even first about becoming a business. It was like, how can I make my day easier? So he kind of came up with the concept for the tool, brought me on board to think through how can we actually get doctors to use this, and like what types of regulatory things do we need to meet, and then brought our chief technical officer on, who's a software engineer, an amazing software engineer, to actually build out the product on the as an application. So we kind of like covered all our bases in that way, and we all bring different experience and expertise to the project, and so far have like fairly successfully bootstrapped our way to where we are. We have a product coming out. We're obviously funding, but I think with the right team, it obviously depends on the product, but you can get a lot done through bootstrapping if you're all willing to put in the work.
Mm-hmm. For kind of, as people are thinking about building the team, is thinking also a little bit about the equity piece.
Yeah.
How did you guys kind of have that broad discussion?
Yeah, I think so we all know each other from before actually starting a business together. And so, that piece is hard. I think
it has to be done, right?
Yeah.
And for a few of the other founders as well, we've had on the podcast, we have all kind of learned there's different methods of splitting it up depending on, do you start at the same time or you build it? So everybody's a little different.
Yeah, I think so. Our founder knows more about this than I do, so I unfortunately can't speak to it much. But what's happened previously is he put forth kind of a plan that he thought may make sense, and exactly based on what you discussed, like when we each came on, what we're contributing, time wise and to the product and to the company, and kind of put forth what he thought made sense. And then we were able to have each individual open dialogues with him on what we thought made sense for ourselves. And I think as long as you are open and honest and the numbers that you're coming up with are like rooted in something, then you can have a good conversation about it and end up somewhere where everybody's happy.
Mm-hmm. So for yourself, you're doing a PhD right now at the
Right.
moment. How long is that going to take?
I have 2 more years.
And how long have you been in your PhD at this
2
point?
years.
So typically 4 years, and you're in the public health school, right?
Yes.
Why did you choose to pursue the startup as your, you're probably just starting your PhD, right?
Right.
Roughly
Yeah.
that time
Last
frame.
year. Yeah. I think that because I had experience in device trial management, I knew that I could offer, some of that, some what I've learned through that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was happy to do so. So I helped run our like pilot testing and, creating surveys and analyzing data that we got back from that, which is what I've done for a long time, which is what I go to school for. Like I'm an epidemiologist. I do a lot of data analysis. And so it wasn't a heavy lift in that way. It was things that I'm good at and things that I like to do. I think obviously the timing is the hardest part. So you have to maintain a balance. I think when there's days that I'm doing like startup stuff, those are the days I'm doing startup stuff. And when there's days I'm doing my PhD work, those are the days I'm doing my PhD work. And if I can keep them separate, that works best for me. I'm sure that other people are able to stagger more throughout the day, but for me, I kind of have to have like my mental space in one or the other.
And as you mentioned, that is like, the balance, right? For a founding team, what is for yourself and for your co-founders, like the workload? Is this like a full-time thing for all of you, or is it kind of both, all three of you are still doing different things and kind of like this is still something you're developing along the way before you fully commit?
Yeah, definitely the latter. Nikhil, the founder, is an emergency medicine resident, second year. So he's at the hospital all the time and he's doing this. He's waking up early and working on this before he goes to work. And he's working on this late when he gets home from work. And so he contributes just a ton of time to it. And it's amazing that we have someone who is so willing to contribute on top of being a resident. Myself, I contribute when possible, and when I'm really needed. But I'm not directly involved in product development. So my piece really comes later once we've started collecting more data. And I'll be fine tuning our machine learning algorithm. So, there'll be times where one of our workloads is huge and then the other person can catch up on other things. And then someone else's workload becomes huge as we move on to another phase of the project. So I think supporting each other through that and being like, wow, you're doing like amazing. Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. When someone is taking on a huge, heavy load is important. Again, it's just like a lot of communication with your co-founders. And then our software engineer also works full time. And so he's doing this again before work, on his lunch break, and after work. So it's challenging.
Definitely. And is this your first startup?
Yes.
What have you felt specifically for yourself was kind of like something you weren't really expecting going into entrepreneurship?
I knew nothing about business or entrepreneurship. I've always been like the sciencey person, really introverted and just like numbers. And so getting out of my comfort zone and pitching and speaking about the product and to investors and doing this podcast, has made me an even better like scientist, because I feel like it's made me more confident in even speaking at research talks now. So that's been like new and really cool and interesting. And then also just learning about marketing, which I knew nothing about. Now I like watch the Airbnb ads and I'm like, oh, that's why they probably did that. Like, oh, that works well. It's just been a completely different world to anything that I've ever been a part of, but I've learned so much in just 1 year.
Absolutely. And you mentioned you had this experience before with medical devices. And so
Yes.
that's obviously there's some cross skill applicability
Right.
to what you're doing now. And as you mentioned, that all these, the medical industry has all these big established firms, and things aren't very apt to change very
Mm-hmm.
often, except that, recently there's this mass change. Why do you think there hasn't been this sort of innovation for medical professionals
Yeah.
prior?
So I think there are other people doing this
Mm-hmm.
are doing things that are similar, but I think a lot of times it's not coming from the people who are using them. And unfortunately, when you want to design a tool for doctors and clinicians, it's hard to get in the room with them, um, to ask them questions or just to get any time with them to see what they want. So I think some of those tools, they've come out and then doctors don't like them.
Mm-hmm.
They're hard to use. They require a lot of training. They don't like the interface. They don't like
Right.
the output. So we're really lucky that we have a doctor on our team and that I have a network from the hospitals that like people were so willing to talk to us about what they want. And because it benefits them too, right? Like, can you add this feature? Can you add this feature? So I think, yeah, there's tools out there. They're just maybe not taking off as well as they need to because they're not designed with the clinician in mind,
Mm-hmm.
um, which we are. That's our main goal, is to be designed to be easy to use for clinicians.
And as you mentioned, this app is going to be on people's phones, or like
Yes.
because people carry their phones with them all the time. Why has there been, or why hasn't there been like such a mobile friendly or mobile
Mm.
oriented
Mm.
work process, perhaps
Yeah,
for doctors?
it's really coming out right now. Yeah. I don't know why previously it hadn't existed. What had existed was the microphones plugged into your desktop. Um, I think with like better natural language processing and such, yeah, it's started to come out in like apps. And so yeah, there is this space of people doing dictation. And there's a number of competitors in this space. Yeah, I think it's just going to be which of these tools is best suited to the user, is priced properly, which we're proud of and we think sets us apart.
Sort of the, I guess, the more traditional product of the microphone is, an old is legacy, and this competition potentially because it's meant to be replaced or be
Mhm.
made more efficient. How much for people's awareness would usually those might cost for a hospital system or a doctor to purchase?
The microphone tools, oh,
Hmm.
thousands and thousands of dollars. Yeah.
And who would
They're
make those? Well, what firms typically are?
I think Dragon is like one of the historical Microsoft like microphone tools. Um, yeah, they cost so much money, um, and a lot of the physicians don't use them. Like they may be plugged into the computer, but they
Okay.
just rely on typing anyway. The talking into the microphone isn't faster for them, um, and so it's just going unused in a lot of cases. Yeah. And that's, like I said, it's because it's just direct transcription. And so it's prone to make mistakes and
Hmm.
typos and hear the words wrong and all of that. And you have to go back and fix it. And so by using AI and um, naturally, like some really good NLP, we're able to have like some really accurate transcription,
Hmm.
um, which is great.
For kind of your future for this product, you have this minimum viable product, this
Mm-hmm.
initial launch happening in April.
Mm-hmm.
What's the runway after that? What do you imagine? Are you gonna, as a startup, kind of raise your first like seed round, or
Yeah.
dilutive funding at some point?
Yeah, I think so. We've been bootstrapping. We have won a couple of pitch competitions, and I know you said some of your listeners are new founders, but we were part of the Pennovation Accelerator in Philly last summer, which was great, and it culminates in a pitch contest, and we won Best Pitch there. I really recommend that accelerator program. We're currently a part of Wharton's Cypher Accelerator, which is a really amazing accelerator program. And they have a pitch and demo day on April 12th in New York City, which we will be at with some amazing investors. So we're looking forward to that. I think, we didn't focus on large scale raising for a while because we were just working on getting the product to be the best it could and customer acquisition. We've just been speaking with so many practitioners and small groups and have, a number of potential users lined up for it to come out for once the tool comes out. But we will shortly need more money, especially because we have a lot of features that we want to add and we want to work on health record integration, like with Epic, and that costs money. So yeah, I think, pretty soon after we launch, even, beginning like in the next couple of weeks, we want to kind of restart our funding push in like a seed or pre-seed round. We're looking to raise about $2.5 million, and that will go to a number of things, but it's ensuring HIPAA compliance, which is something that we're not willing to waver on. We're working with a consulting group who provides like the highest level of HIPAA compliance to tools like ours, which costs money, obviously.
Of course.
We'd like to expand our team. We'd like some additional developers and some marketing folks and some sales folks, and health record integration. Again, we need to spend money on, and then a marketing campaign. So there's a number of things that we need money for.
Right, of course. And for our audience who might be interested in building their own startups, especially if they have just initially launched a product or they're about to launch that product, find that optimal market fit, as you mentioned, you're trying to raise a decent amount. Yeah. That's a decent, 2.5 million is definitely a good amount for people to have at a seed stage, certainly. How do you come about, I guess, projecting sort of a valuation for the company?
Yes. My business partner, Nikhil, has worked on that piece. It's a little bit further outside of my comfort zone. Be happy to have you talk to him at some point. All I know is it takes a lot of research and a lot of talking to people in the space. But I don't know our current valuation.
Got it. But that's going to be the valuation to raise this $2.5 million.
Yeah, so he has those numbers. I don't know if that makes
no worries at all. I guess as you think about building out this company and many founders, you have your first few, your co-founders, then you're building your first few employees into your team. What do you think are some of the most critical parts of hiring for like your first few full-time employees, perhaps, because, those first few employees end up shaping, your company tremendously?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question and something that we need to think about. I think through Wharton and UPenn in general, which we have affiliation with through Nikhil, who's a Penn medicine doctor, we were able to bring in some interns last year. So yeah, they weren't necessarily hires, but they brought different strengths and different levels of like motivation and excitement for being a part of a startup in the product. So I think, I learned from them that patience is important, like especially when you're in an early startup, and being willing to work with the company and grow with the company, and not everything is perfect right away. So that's been really important. Excitement has been really, really important, and eagerness to learn and support the business. Belief in the product and in the founding team is really important. So those are things, outside of just like hard skills that I'm looking for. And there's so many skilled people having, networks within Harvard and Penn that we can find an amazing engineer, but an engineer who wants to grow, who can be patient through the ups and downs of a startup, and who believes in us and Pocket Scribe is really what's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you're tackling this problem, right? Trying to make this process in the medical field more efficient. Where do you believe there will be some of the biggest additional changes, perhaps, to the medical industry in the years and maybe the next decade or so?
I think there's going to be a lot more integration of AI. And I
Hmm.
think it's going to be in spaces that I would never even be able to think of, but there's going to be someone who's like, this process can be improved by AI. And it's going to be some random process and it's going to make like millions of dollars. There's so many things going on in the hospital system. Again, that we just don't know about, but I'm
Hmm.
sure that can be improved. So I think looking out for that. I don't know, as people are
Hmm.
thinking of if they are interested in health tech or health AI tools, I think about spaces that are slowing things down or where you think there could be improvement.
Hmm.
Um, and how can you make it better?
Yeah. Do you think that for your company, just starting out, right? Is the goal, and many founders have to approach this when you start taking funding from VCs,
Mm,
is what's the end goal for the company itself?
right.
Is it to be its own thing and to grow, or do you hope that perhaps you'll build sufficient market and
Mm,
a proven model and then perhaps have it be acquired by
yeah.
a bigger company or a legacy company
Yeah.
that could integrate this more widely
Right.
at a certain point?
I think it could go either way. Like we've had discussions in both cases, and we're happy to grow this company for as long as it takes for it to be big and important and doing the work that we want it to do.
Hmm.
um, because we are initially targeting like independent practitioners and small and medium sized groups. I think if we're able to inundate that space enough, that could make us attractive as an acquisition target to some of the bigger tools that are similar to us, but going for the bigger hospitals. Um, so I think it could be either. Right now, I'm just trying to get the product out and get
Right.
people excited about it and like make a difference in clinicians' lives and see where it goes from there.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. For our audience, Pocket Scribe is going to be coming out in April of
In April, yes.
2024.
And
So
follow us on LinkedIn,
there we go. And
just
we'll
Pocket Dash Scribe.
include that in the description for the
Okay, great.
episode. Well, Jen, thank you very much.
Thank you.